For somebody who absolutely loves the sound of his own voice, Donald has been keeping very quiet about the violent attack against Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. Josh Shapiro held a press conference on Monday morning in front of his ravaged home, which had essentially been firebombed, condemning this kind of violence.
This kind of violence is becoming far too common in our society.
Shocking developments out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania this morning. An accused arsonist targeting the official residence of Governor Josh Shapiro while the governor and his family were inside sleeping. Images show the damage from a Molotov cocktail thrown into several rooms of the home. The attack forcing the governor, his wife, and their 4 children and a visiting guest to flee for their lives. Governor Shapiro hosting Passover in one of those rooms Saturday that was later set on fire.
Yes, we know that the incidents of things like racism and anti-Semitism and misogyny and attacks against the LGBTQ plus community have been increasing in recent years, and we know the reason: Donald Trump. One of the main purposes of liberal democracy is to contain the worst among us, that 25 to 28% of the most hateful people, and yet now such people are represented by 100% of the federal government. So of course, this kind of thing is going to get worse. The Harrisburg Bureau of Fire extinguished the blaze, but images of the damage to the governor's residence paint a picture of just how serious this attack was. Some members of Donald's regime, including J.D. Vance, denounced the attacks on Shapiro and his family, but Donald has absolutely nothing to say. Maybe it's because Shapiro has stood up to Donald in the past, and Donald can't handle that because he's so incredibly weak and pathetic. It's basically just yet another demonstration of how classless and cowardly he is. He's been evading questions, even when asked directly by reporters to comment.
Reaction to the governor of Pennsylvania, his mansion was set on fire. Do you have any reaction?
I just heard about it. No, I have to look into it.
Yeah, I have to look into this thing that's all over the news, and nobody told me. Nobody. My vice president knew, and he didn't tell me. How weird. Yeah, well, he's just lying because this is what he does when he doesn't want to comment on anything. Like, for example, our 4 missing soldiers who turned out to be dead near the Belarusian border. He doesn't want to take responsibility, or he doesn't want to show compassion, which he's incapable of anyway, to somebody he considers an enemy. So while Donald cowers, the tales of the attacker, I should say alleged attacker, are surfacing, which paints a much more sinister picture of online radicalism than is typically presented to us by the corporate media. But before we go further, please hit like and share this video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We're really trying to increase our subscribership, and it helps us tremendously. As independent media, your support helps us reach more people and keep this going. All right, so let's get back to what we know so far about the attack on the Pennsylvania governor's mansion, Governor Shapiro and his family. The suspect broke into the governor's residence around 2 o'clock in the morning, setting fire to the home. He's since turned himself in, yesterday that happened, and said that he was, quote, harboring hate, unquote, for the governor. He allegedly planned to beat the governor with a hammer. He's under arrest and being charged with attempted murder, aggravated arson, burglary, terrorism, and related offenses. We have since learned, however, that according to the suspect's mother, he is suffering from severe schizophrenia, and he's currently off his meds. Which means that it's very difficult to look for motives here. However, that having been said, it is important to understand a couple of things. First of all, Donald Trump not just doesn't have any interest in mental health or making it easier to treat the mental illnesses of the American people, because he's done nothing but slash funding for such things. So there's that. And it's quite fascinating considering Donald Trump is one of the most psychiatrically disordered people I've ever met. Also, though, we cannot discount the very real impact the increases in online activities can have on the most vulnerable among us, particularly people who feel increasingly isolated in a country that is awash with toxic masculinity, where in certain corners of the internet, things like racism and misogyny and anti-Semitism and LGBTQ plus hatred thrive to a degree that most of us would find both horrifying and unimaginable. The attack happened hours after Shapiro's family celebrated the beginning of Passover on Saturday night. Shapiro had shared an image of his family's Seder dinner table. The investigation is ongoing, and law enforcement is looking into Shapiro's faith as a motivating factor in this attack. But again, given the at least potential state of the suspect's mental illness, it's hard to assign motive here. But again, we need to continue to look at this in the larger context. Pete Buttigieg posted on Facebook, quote, Chasten and I are relieved that Governor Shapiro and his family are safe. While we wait to learn more, this much is clear. The targeting of a public official and his family, especially a prominent Jewish official, on a major Jewish holiday is unconscionable and has no place in our country, unquote. Now, this potential religiously link and Donald's silence is interesting to me. Donald is refusing to condemn an act of violence, even though he and the Trump regime have been very vocal about anti-Semitism lately. He's happy to try to deport students speaking out against the genocide being committed by Israel in Gaza, by calling people who actually think it's wrong to commit genocide against the people anti-Semitic. But when one of his biggest critics, whom again Donald will consider an enemy because how dare you criticize him, is attacked allegedly because of his faith, because he's Jewish, Donald, the champion of Israel, or really Benjamin Netanyahu, has nothing to say. Does he really only care about hatred towards Jews when it is politically expedient, when it's a weapon he can use against those who express different beliefs from his or from Benjamin Netanyahu, fellow criminal and mass murderer? Or when people express these beliefs are immigrants? Yes, it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. Also, again, the context is incredibly important. For one thing, and I want to talk about the suspect for a second, he expressed extreme views online. Does this have something to do with religious delusions or delusions of persecution? I don't know. We will likely find out. But what we do know for a fact is that there have become increasingly safe places on the internet in order to express such beliefs and in order to have them legitimized and echoed. And these are not the darkest corners of the internet anymore. This isn't the 4chan of old. This is not the dark web. Now, we know, because this, of course, the suspect social media posts have come under scrutiny, that this coincides with a blockbuster trial between the Federal Trade Commission and Meta, which kicked off today. Meta is accused of building an illegal social media monopoly when it acquired WhatsApp and Instagram, arguing that they broke anti-competition laws. So how do these two stories relate? In January, as Donald took office, Meta's billionaire CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, who has no principles whatsoever, rolled back hate speech protections and third-party fact-checking as his empire grew. Now, this was clearly a political move to align himself with Donald, who's a fan not just of mistruth and disinformation, but a fan of letting people say whatever they want to in support of him, no matter how fascistic those comments may be. Since then, Meta has pulled back on limiting speech that targets women, religious groups, LGBTQ plus community, immigrants, and other marginalized groups in this country, which, as we know or should know if we've been paying attention, is making it increasingly dangerous to be safe in America if you are a marginalized person. The Center for Countering Digital Hate predicted that these rollbacks would result in at least 277 million more instances of harmful content each year. I'm going to repeat that number because it should boggle your mind. 277 million more instances of harmful content each year because of deliberate, self-serving choices made by these obscenely wealthy oligarchs who control everything on social media. With Meta and Twitter clearly having political alignments with the Trump regime, again, a bunch of fascists, toxic masculinity is surging online and on a global scale. It's affecting young people in particular, and in particular, it is affecting young white men. MSNBC contributor Jason Johnson discussed this troubling trend back in March. This was in relation to the Netflix show Adolescence, which is about how toxic masculinity online can result in real-world violence.
This fringe mainstream mentality is going global and going viral. Polls show young women are moving more to the political left than young men in the age of Trump. And The Independent reports, quote, 60% of Gen Zers believe political leaders, including U.S. President Trump, are fueling misogynistic and divisive language online. This toxic bro culture is driving young women away from social media platforms, according to a recent Amnesty International UK poll. This online toxic bro culture is at the heart of Netflix's newest hit miniseries, Adolescence. Our next guest, Chloe Comby, watched Adolescence with over 100 young people and wrote about it for The Independent. Quote, Adolescence depicts the fallout after 13-year-old Jamie Miller murders his female classmate. It transpires that the very likable and seemingly normal Jamie has been heavily radicalized by online manosphere culture, which has warped his view of women and girls, a tragic global reality today. Watching Adolescence as an adult is a jarring experience because it pulls back the curtain on a world that every teenager with a phone is potentially exposed to. But watching it with teenagers and young adults made me realize that while the problem is prevalent among young people, the solutions might lie with them too.
Yes, the solutions might lie with young people. So many of the solutions we need to the problems we cause for them lie with them. But that's a conversation for another time. But there are two alarming trends we need to consider. One is how under the radar so much of this is. How little parents and other adults know about the kind of content their children are exposed to on an almost constant basis. But equally alarming is what's happening out in the open, just how normalized it has become. We elected as president of the United States a man who was found by a jury of his peers to be an adjudicated rapist. So, should we be surprised that all of this is getting worse when the president of the United States models the worst kind of toxic masculinity and the fragility of a masculinity that can only feel better about itself by demeaning others, especially women? We're going backwards, and it's getting worse and more dangerous. If the FTC wins the case against Meta will have to be broken up, which would be a very good thing, into multiple companies. And it would bring us one step closer to adding more regulation to the internet. Although I have a feeling that the fascist Republican Party might have something to say about that. It might give us a fighting chance at combating the online hate that is swaying some populations further and further to the right, and some cases turning internet vitriol into real-world violence. And we see this happening increasingly. This weekend was just the latest example of it. Speaking in extremes gets clicks on social media. And in that arena, Republicans are quite frankly kicking our asses because they have been preparing for this for decades, while Democrats have just sat by and thought everything is going to be just fine. And they have failed time and time again to recognize the threats facing us, and they have failed to invest at all, let alone adequately, in building a media infrastructure that could combat the dangers we now face. Jack Schlossberg, son of Caroline Kennedy, relative of Robert Kennedy, the Secretary, unfortunately, of Health and Human Services, and an internet sensation in his own right, discussed this on The Blueprint with Jen Psaki.
The internet is like a nuanced destruction machine. And so there's no room for qualifying anything ever. Don't waste your time. If you're going to tweet something out, like make it so extreme, that you can't, that it's completely, that's what Trump does. It's like a completely clear statement. Take it all the way. And that's the only thing that really resonates online, because everything else, it's too confusing otherwise. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is you have to be controversial or unexpected. So you have to be very clear and you have to be very controversial in order to break through, I think. And conservatives are good at playing with that without getting in trouble. And I don't know that we've come up with our own style of being funny and taking risks. And people talk a lot about how Democrats lost young men in this election. And I think a huge part of that is like not because we focus on the wrong policies, but because we seem so risk averse.
Yeah, we are risk averse, and it's pathetic. And the Democratic base wants people fighting for them, not playing by rules that no longer exist. So why does it matter that we fight back? Why does it matter that we create spaces in which we can fight back? Why does it matter that rich Democrats, to the extent they seem to exist, invest heavily in independent media? Well, first of all, corporate media has failed us so many times now that we cannot reasonably rely on corporate media anymore. So there's that. Secondly, we need an independent media that is not beholden to corporate interests, that can say the controversial thing, that can challenge people in a way that I guess is going to get clicks, that can combat the lies and the misinformation and the disinformation and the hate, the pure hatred coming from the right. I am not at all suggesting that we do our own version of that, because we're different. We don't want to be like them. What we need is people to say quite clearly what is going on here. These are not normal times. I don't know, is this controversial enough for you? The United States of America is being run by a fascist regime. Our rights are being eroded on a daily basis. People in this country who used to feel relatively safe experience danger day in and day out because the people in charge hate them and are giving permission to the worst among us to attack them and to make their lives terrifying and miserable. Is that controversial enough for you? The person leading this charge, because he was enabled every step of the way by the Republicans in Congress and by a significant minority of the American people who just haven't been paying enough fucking attention. Donald Trump is responsible for this. He didn't do it alone, obviously, but he is the one giving permission down the line to all of these weak, pathetic people who are, yes, shocking, I know, even more weak and more pathetic than he is. So what are we going to do about it? We cannot sit here and do nothing. This is our time. This is our time to take back the narrative, because we are on the right side of this. We want everybody in this country to be free, to feel safe, and have the rights that have been guaranteed to them by the Constitution of the United States of America. We have failed miserably in this mission, but now is our time, and it is time for us to seize the moment.
Please take a second and like and share this video. It'd be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating, because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.